Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Three names that no doubt anyone who spent any kind of time in Sunday school can rattle off quite easily. But I want us to take another look at the story this morning for what I tell you, the Lord moves in miraculous ways, His wonders to perform. See the story, just to give us a little bit of context. Like we talked about this morning, the Lord often works in object lessons. He gives us examples, things, concrete things that we can hold on to, that we can understand. Because see, our God is so past finding out. But because He loves us so much, and because He wants us to get to know Him, because He desires to not just enter into a relationship with Him, but grow in relationship with Him. So because of that, He gives us these object lessons. He gives us these stories. They're not just stories that we can tell and feel good about what's happened, but they're stories that are there for us to learn from, to extract from. For we are not in this day and age, but there's nothing new under the sun. So the same things that the children of Israel went through, the same things that these three Hebrew boys went through, are the same things that we go through today. And so in context, when you see what's happened, we see that the children of Israel, because of their own wrongdoing, because of their own their willingness to go another way besides the way that the Lord has instructed them to go, they find themselves in bondage. The Lord, being a merciful God, He warned them time and time and time again. But yet the people as a group would not hear, for the Lord saw Israel as a people, just as He sees the church as one. And so because Israel as a whole turned away from the Lord, He allowed them and moved His enemies and put them into bondage. You know, I like to think of the Lord as the ultimate chess player. You see, I'm learning about the game of chess, and it's very much a game of strategy. It's very much a game of strategy where you've got these pieces on the board and you need to maneuver your pieces around to be able to get to your ultimate goal. But see, sometimes if you're just starting out, sometimes your opponent will make a move that seems so strange to you. Sometimes your opponent will make a move that seems to sacrifice one man and get rid of him. And sometimes when you're starting to learn the game, you say, well, why would you do a dumb move like that? And then you being so excited, you move because you think you've got a clear shot. You think you've got a clear move, and then your opponent comes and shows you off and checkmate. Why? Because there's always another door. There's always another option that you just didn't see. And so our God, I love to think of Him as the ultimate chess player, for He moved the enemy. We see the kingdoms of this world all belong to the Lord. And it was funny, after the election, I was listening to all the back talk after. People were moaning and groaning because Obama was elected again, and people were getting so distraught and say, oh, the country's gone down and all this. But I kind of chuckled in my spirit. I didn't say anything, but I'm thinking in my spirit, but it's the Lord who ordains all things anyway. So if He's there, it's for a purpose. If He's there, it's for a reason. Even our own leaders, sometimes we think of them, and it's an impetus for us to pray for our leaders, not to grumble and complain against them, but to pray for them, because they do have the rule over us. And so as the children of Israel are in Babylon, we hear the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were chosen amongst others, and they ended up in the court of the king. And as they were in the court of the king, there was a commandment that went forth. Now the commandment was that, and you can read the rest of the story in the beginning of Daniel chapter 3, where Nebuchadnezzar had built an image of gold. And it was a pretty big image. It says it's 60 cubits, that's 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. So this is a pretty huge statue that he had built. And so he built this image. And so the understanding was that when the music played, when the praise started, if you will, that the people would bow down to this image. Now this image was to represent the king. Right. This image was to represent the king. And so he called all the people. Nobody was left out of this decree, but all the people were called to come and to worship this image. My God, I started to think about it. I started to look behind the scenes and look how the enemy stands behind different images to garner praise. For when we're giving praise to idols, we're really giving it to the enemy. Amen. We're praising the enemy. There's so many things. And I was in the car this morning. I took a cab to church this morning because the metro was down. And it was so funny because as I was rereading the text, the cab driver starts to turn up his music. And of course it wasn't any godly music. I can't even tell you what the words were, because my first instinct was to be like, I really wish he would just turn this thing off. But then I started to think about what was happening is, there's especially with music, I'm going to hit music this morning, especially for the young people that are listening, especially music. You see, we don't always understand the way and the way that music moves us. But there's a spirit behind it. Sometimes we we think so innocently, oh, well, it's not a big deal. They're not really talking about anything bad. But there's a spirit behind the music. And what it does, it lures you in with a nice beat. And I don't know if it ever happened to you. You just walk in a store and you're not really paying attention. You're looking for whatever you're shopping for. And then all of a sudden your foot starts tapping and you start moving your shoulders and you kind of catch yourself. You're like, why am I moving? But that's what it does. Music has this ability to capture you. Why? Because there's a spirit behind it and it lures you in with the beat. Why? Because, like Brother Cliff said, it's sensual. There's something about that beat when you start to feel it. It makes you feel nice, and then you start humming along, and something you don't even know what you're singing, but you're humming along anyway if you don't know the words, but then the words get into you. But it's a vehicle. Music is a vehicle to transmit a message. It's a vehicle to transmit a message. And I was having a conversation with my brothers. He's heavily involved in church music. That's his job. He's a church musician. And we're talking about it. We're doing a Bible study together. We're looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 25. We're looking at how the people prophesied with their music. They prophesied with their hearts. When we come and we play and we sing, it's not just, something we do just to feel nice, but it's prophecy. And what a prophecy is a word from God. Yes. So when we come and we sing these songs, we are delivering a word from the Lord. But see, the thing about music, it has this ability to get past your filters. Right. It has this ability to get past your filters and to be able to implant something in your spirit. And that's why you have to be careful what you listen to, because you don't know what's being transmitted in your spirit. The other day, every year at my Christmas party, they always ask me to sing, and I always tell them every year, I said, church music is all I know. So if you're going to ask me to sing, no, that's what you're going to get. And every year they're like, okay, just come and sing. And I said, okay, but I'm letting you know, this is the disclaimer. Like, if you ask me to sing, this is what you're going to get, because this is, and so many people came up to me afterwards and they said, my God, I don't know what it is, but when you sing, it just touched me. And I have to sing, I told her, I said, thank God, because it's not me. See, they think it's me. Right. They think it's me, but somehow the music has used its filter to get and deposit something in their spirit where so they don't even know. They don't even know what it was. But my God, one guy came up to me crying. He's like, I don't know what it is, but he's like, I really feel when you were singing, I can feel it. Right. Why? It's because the song was transmitting a message. It was dropping something in their spirit. They don't even know what it was. They don't even know that it was the anointing of the Lord that's upon the life that's been transmitted in their spirit. They don't even know. All they think is a nice song to get them, put them in the mood for the holidays, but they don't realize that the music is a vehicle to transmit something in their spirit. So Nebuchadnezzar, he made the proclamation that when the music played, when the dulcimer and the harp and the sackbut and all the different instruments that they had, when it started to play, it was time for the people to come and to worship. But the worship was not to be directed to the Most High God, but the worship was meant to be directed to this idol or directed to this image that he had created for himself. Let me tell you, church, that the devil is the greatest copycat. See, when we look at the surface, we see that it's Nebuchadnezzar. We see him as a king, but you got to know that there's a spirit behind it. See, there's a natural realm that we see and that we operate in, but behind the natural realm, there's a spiritual realm. And if our eyes are closed to the spiritual realm, then we'll be confused. We won't understand what is happening. But even though Nebuchadnezzar in the natural had set an idol, and Satan was behind it trying to garner praise and garner worship, said, listen, let me infiltrate Nebuchadnezzar. Let me get behind Nebuchadnezzar. See, sometimes the devil will allow you to get to a high place. Because the higher you get, the more influence you have. And the more influence you have, the further you're able to spread your seed. The more influence you have, the further you're able to spread your message. Musicians, you only have to look to the natural world to see the popular musicians and know that everybody's singing this song. You can go to just about any country, even in the backwoods somewhere, and they're singing the Jay-Z and Britney Spears and all these popular artists, Rihanna and all these. Why? Because they've gotten to a place and their message has been transmitted. There's not a place in the world that you can go where their music is not infiltrated. Why? Because they use their influence to spread their message. Satan hides behind the worship of idolatry, but he's the greatest copycat. See, he understands. Satan's no fool, but he understands that in order for people to worship, there has to be an object or something that people can see. See, we as human beings were made to worship. As beings, that's our purpose. Our purpose is to worship. worship. There must be something that we can see that we can worship. And that's why God in his infinite wisdom created an image for himself. See, otherwise if there were no image, there'd be, well, where would we worship? Where would our worship be directed to? We'd be lost. We wouldn't know where to direct our worship. But God in his infinite wisdom, being invisible, he created a visible manifestation to sit on the throne so that the angels would know to whom to say, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The earth is filled with your glory. The Lord created an image for himself, but this image is not some other being, but this image, he manifested himself and created an image for himself so that men could know that Jesus Christ is the express image of the invisible God. But God remains invisible to us, and how can we know who he is? How can we get to know and be in close proximity and close relationship with him if there was nothing for us to behold? But the Lord took a step further. He didn't just stay on the throne, but he caused his image to come down in flesh and walk amongst us. And John tells us we beheld his glory, even as the only begotten Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. But you see, the world didn't know this image. They didn't know this image because they didn't want to have anything to do with it, for the words that he spoke were strange. They couldn't understand. They couldn't understand the principle with which he came. Even his own disciples that walked with him right before he ascended, they said, Lord, is this the time when you're going to come and establish your kingdom? Is this the time when you're going to come and take over? We're going to reign with you? Jesus said, it's not for you to know the times and the seasons which the Lord has put in his power. But he said, but you shall receive power. You shall receive power because you believe, because you know where to direct your worship, because you follow my word. You shall receive power when the Holy Ghost has come. The Lord created an image for himself so that we can know where to direct our worship. But so too, like I said, Satan is the greatest copycat. You see, he copied the Lord, and he creates images for himself. Creates images for himself so that people would come and worship. And when I was continuing this conversation with my brother, he was talking about, I can't remember, it was, I think he was watching something online, and he was telling me, he's saying how, I think he was talking about Beyonce, and he was watching one of her shows just going through online. He said, it's amazing. Because when people go to these shows, they have their hands up. They sweat till they can't sweat no more. They sing till their voice is hoarse. And it's worship. He said, my God, if the children of God would just worship the Lord half as much as people worship, my God, church would never be the same again. But that's what they do. They come to these concerts, and people don't even realize that they are worshiping. But when they spend their money to buy her shoes and her clothing line, and they get their weaves, just to look just like her, it's worship. Why? Because you want to be like this person. So you're expending whatever it is that you have to be like this person. If we would only expend what we have to be like the Most High, my God, this world, the Bible says in the disciples, the apostle that turned the world upside down in 2 years. How much could we do if we worshiped half as much as this world worships their idols? You see, in the context of this bondage, in the context of this worship, there were 3 Hebrew boys that refused to bow. There were 3 Hebrew boys who refused to bow the knee to these idols. And see, their people are always watching. And so the Bible says that there were some Chaldeans that saw what was happening. And so perhaps they were trying to get chummy with the king. Sometimes there's some people who have to step on others to be able to get to where they want to be. I don't know if you know anybody like that. But sometimes people will step on other people's head to be able to get to where they want to be. And so the Bible said there were some Chaldeans who were quick to come to the king and said, listen, king, just so you know, I don't want to be tattletale, but I don't want to tell out anybody's business, but there's some Hebrew boys who are not following the rules. There's some Hebrew boys that when the music's playing, they stand and they don't bow and they don't worship and they don't get down like you told us to get down.